My name's Bo Wright, Superintendent of Schools, and to my left.
Good evening, Dina Wilson, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
Good evening, Nell Lundensell, your Assistant Superintendent of Student and Family Services.
Good evening. Pat McHugh, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources.
Hi, Andy Whitmore, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations.
All right, well, thank you for being here with us tonight to discuss this critically important topic of reopening our schools. I want to talk about the format for the session. I'm going to give a very brief superintendent's report to start. Our assistant superintendents will give brief updates related to the portions of the plan that they are overseeing. As you know, we administered what's called a thought exchange to help frame the conversation for tonight's session. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the hot topics that surfaced in that exchange, and then we're going to try to leave as much time as possible to field questions that are coming through the live chat. So you can submit questions through YouTube chat, or you can submit them by visiting our website at rhnet.org/COVID-questions. We expect a lot of activity this evening, so I'll say up front that any questions we don't get to in tonight's session, we will respond in writing via email. So this has been a challenging time for everyone. The past 6 months have been really difficult. They've been difficult for the folks in this room, just like they've been difficult for folks out in the community. I think it's important to acknowledge the challenges that we've all faced over the course of the past 6 months and the challenges that we'll face as we look to reopen schools in September. But I do want to say that we have greatly appreciated your patience, your consideration, and your support throughout this process. We hope that this evening's conversation is informative. That's what it's meant to be, and we hope that it alleviates some of the concerns that you may have in sending your child either back into a building or having them experience a different sort of learning through our remote learning academy. You know, we've been saying throughout this crisis that even though it's been really difficult, there is a silver lining in that it gives us an opportunity to address some of the systems and structures that are in place that don't always work as well as we want them to for kids. So I do believe, and we do believe, that we're presented with a true opportunity here to come out a little bit better than we came in, so to speak. This has been a Herculean effort. We have been asked in a matter of a few weeks to completely tear down our operation and rebuild it from scratch. Under normal circumstances in a typical school year, as we're looking to reset and hire new staff and program, that's typically a 6-month process. And we're looking at a situation where we have to essentially start from scratch and rebuild everything in about 6 weeks. So I can't say enough about the level of effort that our team here in Rush-Henrietta has put into making sure that we can reopen safely. I thank all of you, just like I thank all of our administrators, faculty, and staff for all that you and all that they are doing behind the scenes to make sure that we can reopen. You know, I've tried to be really transparent in our e-news communications that, you know, my initial intentions were to bring back as many students as possible. Initially, we looked at a model where we brought all of our elementary students back, K-6. We knew that we couldn't do that with secondary students right from the beginning, so we always planned to implement a hybrid model with students in grades 7 through 12. But what really wound up being the stumbling block for implementing the K-6 model was transportation, because the local Department of Health wasn't endorsing any plans that had more than 30 students on a bus. If we're going to bring back all of our elementary kids, we were going to have to put 40 to 45 students on. And further complicating matters was the fact that we would have had to put students from different households in the same seat. So folks have asked, well, why didn't you go back out and re-administer the transportation survey? There simply wasn't time, and quite honestly, we would have needed a reduction in ridership of about 35%, which for us is more than 2,000 students, so it wouldn't have been feasible anyway. So we had to pivot. We made the decision on July 28th. I guess that would have been about 3 or 4 days before the plan was due, to go with the K-12 hybrid model paired with a remote learning academy for parents who were not comfortable sending their students back. And we outlined that plan and submitted it to the state and the Department of Health as far as our general principles go, but the work that is happening, has happened since then, is really centered around filling in all the details. So tonight, we're going to be talking about the details related to the hybrid plan and our remote learning academy, along with some of the other hot topics that are centered around things like masking and health screening, safety protocols, whether or not we're going to be testing for COVID and contact tracing as a school district. We'll try to hit all those topics. As I said before, I'm going to turn things over in just a second here to our assistant superintendents, who are going to give brief updates. Then we'll hit some of the key points from the thought exchange to help frame the conversation. But like I said, we want to give as much time as possible to answering the specific questions that are coming through on the chat. So I'm going to turn things over to Nurlan Anselm, and she's going to talk about things through the Student and Family Services lens.
So parents, I'd like to start. We are so excited that you have joined us tonight. But more importantly, we are even more elated that we will be ready to receive your children come September 8th in person in our schools. If there's ever a time for parent engagement and for parents to partner with the school district to ensure not only the education of their children, but also keeping a safe, caring, learning environment in Rush-Henrietta, the time is now. Safe and caring learning environment has always been a part of our vision, and it is even more important at this point. So we need you as we reopen schools. We are putting a lot of plans in place to receive the children safely, to make sure that they get educated, but we can't do that and continue to keep school open if we can't partner with you. And so the first things you're probably wondering about is, how will they know that my children will be safe when they return to school? And so that's where I would say we need you. So we will put together a health screening process. And yes, we can do some of the screening at school, but more importantly, we would like you to answer these questions at night through an email. So we have contracted with the health student management called Frontline, where every night via your phone or via the computer, you will receive an email. And the email will ask you to answer some survey question. And it's the health screening surveys that you are used to now, no matter where you go, whether you go to the doctor's office, it's very similar. And it is a requirement for children to be able to come into the school building. So we are asking you that when you receive this on a nightly basis, that you please complete it. Because what will happen is, if you answer no to every single question, is going to let you know that you can put your kids on the bus and you can send them to school. But if for whatever reason you answer yes to 2 or more questions, is also going to ask that you keep your children home if they are presenting with some symptoms where you need to keep them home. In general, even before COVID occurred, we always encourage parents that when your student has a fever, they have a cough, or they have other maladies that their PCP need to check, that you keep them home until they feel better. And in light of COVID, we want to make sure that everyone is returning into the school building safe. So that's where we need you. And if you forget and you do not get the health screening done, we will have processes in place in the building where we can get that done for your children. But again, the more parents that are involved with completing that health screening, the better it is. And that's where, again, we will need you. Because on a yearly basis, we send you what is called the blue card, where you have to update your information. There are times numbers get changed, emails get changed, and when we do not have the update, so that when we need to reach you, we want to be able to get you right away. So it is even more crucial, as you change emails, as you change numbers, that you let us know. Because if your child gets sick, we want to be able to reach you. And if for whatever reason you are unable to come and pick them up, we would like to know that we can drive them home safely where there will be an adult to receive them. Because in general, if children within the school are presenting with COVID-like symptoms, we will have a process where we check them, but immediately we need to make sure that they leave the building and that they can check with their PCP. So that's where we need you. We need updated information from you, and we need you to complete the surveys that you are going to start receiving for your children prior to putting them on the bus. Prior to putting them on the bus. And so the second thing that you must know that we think is very important, we always welcome visitors onto our campus. And because you are a partner, we've always opened our doors. If you wanted to come and have lunch with your children, we didn't have a problem with that before. But as you know, COVID has changed a lot of things for us. And so we have a visitor management system that you are used to. We've taken your pictures before, your licenses, where we have that on our visitor management system. And so the same thing, parents, when you come to the building and you ring the bell, now we have to ask those same COVID questions of you prior to allowing you to enter the building. And again, we're trying as much as possible to limit the number of individuals that are coming in and out of our buildings, again, for the safety of the children and for the safety of our staff. So we are asking again that as much as possible, if you can take care of any business or anything that you need, if you need information from us or you have an issue, if that can be taken care of over the phone or via email, that would be our preference. But when you do have to come on campus, just please be aware, as much as we want to welcome you and we want to open our doors quickly, there are some of those COVID questionnaires that you are used to that we also have to ask of you. So what we're asking is that you are patient, because it is important that we keep accurate records, attendance record of not only students, but also staff and any individuals walking into our building. Why? Because you may have heard that school districts have to test students for COVID or test staff for COVID. Again, I always like to remind people we are an educational setting, and so there are individuals in the community, especially the Monroe County Department of Health, that takes care of that. We will not be testing your children at school for COVID-like symptoms. And that's why we're asking you to take that questionnaire even before you put them on the bus. However, during the school day, if they are presenting with any illness, just as before, we will let you know. But if they are COVID-like symptoms, we will immediately isolate them. New York State is asking that every building has an isolation room where we can immediately separate the sick from those who are not sick. And again, we will work with you. We will partner with you. As always, we will have you check with your doctor, but at the same time, the Department of Health will be giving us a handout of all testing sites so that if you need to follow up, you'll have that information. Again, we're going to send you a lot of information throughout the year, and that is the main reason why we're asking that you have to make sure that your information is up to date as much as possible. In terms of well-being, you may be wondering, well, you know, it's been 4 months, either my student is struggling, or what is the district doing to prepare to make sure that the emotional and social needs of students are taken care of? So on Monday, you will be receiving 2 sets of survey. One for you to complete as a parent from your perspective, and at the same time, we're asking you, especially at the K-6 level, to sit down with your children, to ask them those questions and help them fill out the survey. For students in grades 7 to 12, they will complete that survey on their own, and we're asking parents, they're going to receive it directly via their email. We're asking you to encourage them to complete it. Why? Because COVID has affected us in different ways. Adults, younger children, adolescents, and we want to make sure that as they return to us in person, that we are putting all of the appropriate supports that they need, in addition to education, because we understand that in order for children to receive all of the great education that we have to offer, they first have to be well. They first have to be whole. And we are in the business of taking care of children holistically. I can go on forever, but I will pass the baton on to my colleague, Ms. Dina Wilson.
Hey, Ms. Wilson, I know that I'm keeping my eye on the questions that are coming in, and I know that you're going to address this in your update, but could you start with the information and planning that is related to the remote learning model? And I just want to say up front, I know, I'm looking at some of the questions and thinking about some of the questions that I've received directly about, switching models throughout the course of the year, and how come we have these hard deadlines as it relates to parents making choices. And I know that Dean is going to be talking about that, but quite simply, these are staffing decisions related to these models that under normal circumstances would have been made weeks ago, if not months ago. And so we have to get them in place in order to staff each of the models, get programs, schedules in place. We have hard deadlines right now and an aggressive timeline in order to be ready for September. So that's why it was so important that we had those hard deadlines. And that's also why we can't allow people to flip-flop models throughout the course of the years, because we have to staff it and program and schedule for it right now. So I'm going to turn things over to Dina and let you talk about things from an instructional standpoint.
Okay. So as Superintendent Wright indicated, we are offering 2 models this upcoming school year. We're offering a hybrid model of instruction as well as a remote learning model. Both models were shared with us through state education a few weeks ago as options for us to offer to our students here in the Rush-Henrietta School District. And I will start with the hybrid model first, since I know that we have a lot of questions around our remote learning academy. The hybrid model really resembles what students are familiar with coming to school every single day. The hybrid model is the 2 days they attend in person, and then the other 3 days they'll be working virtually. When the students are in school, those 2 days of the week, the school day, the instruction will look very similar to how they normally receive instruction. However, even in the in-school days, we'll be using a lot of technology and the online resources that they will be using while they're working virtually. That way, they're adaptive to the resources we're using, and they are able to do them more independently on their virtual learning days. On the virtual learning days, we're going to make sure that we provide what we call asynchronous activities, and I know we've had a lot of questions about that has gone out through the superintendent's e-news that we've tried to answer, but we want to make sure that the asynchronous activities are activities that are interactive for our students and give them a different variety of ways to read, think, listen, write, and engage in their math activities and their courses at the secondary level. With the remote Learning Academy, it really will be a school within a school. It will be our students learning online. They will have a teacher. At the elementary levels, they'll have their classroom teacher, and at the secondary level, they'll have their course teachers. They will have an online school community. They'll be working with other students throughout the district from different schools to make up a second grade or participate in a biology class. We have teachers that will be assigned to work in a remote learning academy, and what will happen is our teachers will develop those relationships with the students online just as they do when they're in person in a hybrid model of instruction. With that being said, we're working very hard to continue the programming that we've always offered in the hybrid in our regular school model and a hybrid, and then offering as much as we can in the remote learning academy for the secondary students, knowing that our course offerings are going to vary based on the enrollment numbers and the courses that students need. However, keep in mind, in the Remote Learning Academy, we will definitely be offering all the courses required for graduation. It is the elective courses that we are still working on, dependent on the course selection the students have chosen, as well as the staff that we have available to teach the courses. I want you to keep in mind also that we're being very mindful that we still are obligated to teach the New York State Learning Standards. We still are going to be required to give assessments this year. Students in both models will get a report card. You'll get a parent progress report quarterly. Teachers will be in conversations with you, emailing you, giving you updates on how your children are doing. But we are being mindful of what we're identifying in our curriculum to teach, and we are identifying only the most essential district assessments to give this year. So there will be some adjustments to the pacing, as well as identifying the most essential and crucial standards and skills to cover with our kids this school year in both models. I want to take a moment to let you know, too, that all the parent surveys that we received, each one of them was read by a team of of administrators and some teachers that were working on various projects. And what we were able to do is be able to find patterns and trends in what worked well last spring and take the suggestions on how we could improve. And we were able to take the parent feedback and help shape our programming for this upcoming year, as well as the supports and resources. Our teachers are going to receive extensive amount of professional development to learn how to teach in a hybrid model, as well as in a total remote online model. With that being said, we have also identified additional parent supports to be put in place. And if you remember last spring, based on the questions we were getting from parents, we quickly were able to share some resources with parents. We made some videos on how to use different aspects of technologies or our programs, and we plan to do the same thing this upcoming school year, so the parents have the supports and resources they need. Most importantly, just like last spring, our teachers did a great job reaching out to their students, connecting, working with the parents. We thank you for your partnership. Last spring, we were successful. Things didn't run perfectly, but we were in reactive mode. And with that said, I couldn't be more pleased when I was able to have conversations with teachers and parents, review the lessons that were being conducted, and see how well our students did finish out the year when we looked at the progress reports that were shared with parents. So we anticipate to have the same partnership this upcoming year and work collaboratively with our parents and give the supports necessary to make sure that the needs of all our students are being met throughout the year.
Okay, very good, Dina. I'm looking at this, and again, keeping an eye on some of the questions. When do we expect that for remote learning we will know if we are in? If you submitted a survey already, then you are in. That's the good news. And we also have a growing wait list of folks who missed the deadline but are interested in being a part of the Remote Learning Academy. And we're going to do our best to accommodate those folks as well. But again, we need to run the numbers, see what we have available as far as staffing goes, and I expect that we should have a response for folks within the week or so.
Yes.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
Paul?
sure.
Some of you have answered the survey and said you wanted 100% remote learning. However, if you have not registered, that means we don't have you completed in the system yet, especially we still have a lot of kindergartners who have not registered, yet we have received a survey for that. So I am imploring you, as soon as possible, to contact our district registrar to get your registration done, because your kids are not activated in the system yet.
Okay, very good. I also see that, I'm keeping an eye on the chat here, and I see that there are some folks who are interested in information related to external programs for secondary students such as EMCC, and that program will be available to students. They are aligning their schedule to component districts with the understanding that almost every district in the county for secondary students is on a hybrid schedule, and we will be transporting those students as well. We're going to shift gears here and let Andy Whitmore, our assistant superintendent for finance and operations, talk about some of the operations pieces related to transportation, food service, and disinfecting. And along those same lines, I see a question in here around masking, how it's going to be applied in the classroom. What about students that can't wear a mask, and how will students be able to interact in the class and stay safe? So as a lead-in to that conversation, I'm going to address the question that's in the chat. We received pretty clear guidance from the State Education Department right after the governor came out and said that we were going to have to submit our plans on the 31st. The guidance from the State Education Department said you have to either wear a mask or be 6 feet apart or be behind a barrier. We've since then received updated guidance from local organizations such as the Regional Task Force in consultation with our local Department of Health that has more stringent guidelines around masking. And that guidance says that essentially students and staff should be in masks pretty much all the time, with the exception of when they are eating meals. So the short version of trying to explain this is, when students are on a bus, they wear a mask. When students and staff are moving about in hallways, they wear a mask. When students and staff are moving about within a classroom and distancing could be compromised, they mask. There's some flexibility during that time with instruction. However, the general rule is that most of the time, students and staff will be masked even if they are distanced. However, it's also required that ample masking breaks are put in place during those times in a classroom when it's appropriate for students to take a break. So again, they would have to be distanced, looking at when classrooms are going to be outside and things of that nature. If students are sitting distanced, doing a quiet activity, that will be part of the work that administrators are doing at a building level with teachers, is to identify those points in a schedule where masking breaks would be appropriate. So having said that, let's turn things over to Andy, who's going to talk about a range of topics related to specific to health and safety.
All right, and the operations cover a lot of areas, but it starts with mask. So if as a parent you've determined that your child is safe to come to school that day, you've answered the questionnaire, the thing we require, we need masks on the bus. Everybody should be masked on the bus at all times. The reason being, it's impossible to keep everybody 6 feet apart on the bus. What we are planning on doing is assigning one student per seat, unless there are multiple household members. They would be encouraged to sit together so we can increase our capacity, but otherwise it'll be one student per seat. They need to be masked. Our bus drivers will have a supply of masks. If you forget to give your student their mask or they lose it while waiting for the bus, we will have masks available when they get on, but we do encourage you send them out of the house with a mask. The driver will be using disinfecting wipes on the entrance railings after each school run. And disinfecting foggers will be used after each shift. So once in the morning and once in the afternoon, the bus driver has a fogging machine that will give a fine disinfecting mist throughout the entire bus, which will thoroughly disinfect all areas on the bus. Parent drop-off and pickup will look a little bit different. We're asking no parents to come to the school. Please don't accompany your child into the school. Drop off in the morning. We'll have staff outside at the elementary level to greet your kids when they get out of the car. And same thing in the afternoon. We ask you that you remain in your car. A staff member will ask for ID, and then they'll call to have your child sent out to you. And one thing we are changing with our daycare requirements, there'll be only one daycare or different location other than your house allowed per week. Typically it's 2, but because of the tight capacity on the buses, we will limit that to 1 this year. And due to the complexity of the bus routing, typically we start in April for the bus routing. So what we're doing is we're taking the routes that we've developed and we're trying to update it with the information we receive about students who are learning remote and the hybrid cohorts, and we're adjusting as we go along. But that means the times on these routes will be a little bit different than what you see on your schedule. So we're asking more flexibility and understanding for the first few weeks of school. Be out at your bus stop at least 10 minutes earlier than the time that says on the bus route sheet, because we just don't know how long it'll take given the changes that we've made. We hope that everybody will have a better understanding after the first few weeks, so we just ask for a lot of patience starting out. Once your child gets into school, typically we offer breakfast in the morning. What we're doing in the cafeteria for both breakfast and lunch, we are greatly reducing the number of options. Those of you who've been in school during mealtime, you understand that, or you observe that there's a lot of lineups at the cafeteria serving areas. We're going to be limiting options and choices this year. So what we're doing is pre-train and pre-paying. So we'll have all the meal components on a tray, so the student, as they go through the line, will grab it and move forward, and this will enable our social distancing. And same thing with paying. We encourage parents, please prepay online as much as possible. If your child does come in with cash and pays with cash, we'll gladly accept it. However, we won't be giving change back. Whatever change your child is due will be a credit to your account, but we're trying to minimize interactions. And likewise, there'll be minimal snack options. At the elementary, there probably won't be any snack options, and at secondary, there'll be fewer snack options. And we understand this is going to be disappointing for a lot of students, but we need to increase the rate of flow through in the lines to enable proper social distancing at mealtime. The schools are working on schedules to stagger and separate the students at the meals. So some of them will do it by classroom, some of it as kids get off the bus, some of the kids will be going to the cafeteria, others will go to their classroom and then be sent down a little bit later. So schools are working on schedules to ensure your children are going to the cafeteria in staggered schedules so as not to, so we can adequately social distance. And one of the things we looked at was the 6 feet condition. We were going to have 6 feet of separation between students, which means some of them would be in the cafeteria, some would be in the gym. The principals really thought that would be adverse for the students. They enjoy their social interaction during mealtime. So what we've gone to is plastic barriers on all of the lunch tables. So each student will be surrounded on 3 sides by a plastic barrier, which is clear, so they can see and interact with other students. There'll still be reduced seating at the cafeteria tables, but closer than 6 feet because of the barriers to allow some social interaction. And the last thing is, we will provide meals for students who aren't in school that day. We know the majority of the students on any given day probably won't be in school, so we'll have a remote feeding site at the high school, similar to what we've done all summer. The one difference is the state will not allow us to provide a free meal to every student the way we could over the summer. It'll be the normal guidelines. You have to qualify for free and reduced, and otherwise, if you pay, we'll ask for prepay and pre-ordering of meals to be picked up. In right now, it's tentatively going to be Monday, Thursday, Fridays, 3 to 4:30, and Wednesdays, 10 to noon at the high school parking lot. But once we firm that up, we'll send out more information. Facilities, your buildings will look a little bit different. When you walk in, each building, the corridors will be separated with a line down the middle of the hallway. There'll be social distancing circles along each side of the corridors with directional arrows in between those. There will be reduced seating in classrooms, cafeterias, auditoriums to encourage social distancing. Typically, classrooms will consist of desks that are 6 feet apart, or at the elementary level, there'll be tables. So that means usually we can sit about 14 desks in a classroom 6 feet apart. A few classrooms may have more seating than that. If that's the case, we'll put up plastic barriers to protect the students as well. And most elementary classrooms will look different. We're taking out the rugs that are typically in elementary classrooms because we can't have the small group meetings that we used to have, and also for cleaning purposes and disinfecting at the end of the day. But we will have kidney tables with shields on them to enable the teacher to meet with small groups with the students. When they're at that table, they'll be wearing their mask most of the time, but the teacher can work in small groups with them. All of the excess furniture is being removed from the classrooms to enable the desks to be spaced properly, the rugs removed, soft-sided furniture, bean bags will be removed. Anything that can't be disinfected properly will be taken out of the classroom, and teachers have been coming in both last week and this week to take out some of that excess material. We'll have hand sanitizer and disinfecting wipes available in all the classrooms. Most of the elementary classrooms do have sinks, and so the teachers will be encouraging frequent hand washing for their students prior to going to the cafeteria or when they get in from recess. We'll be installing shields throughout some of the office areas. The main office will have it to protect visitors and the staff, although we are greatly limiting the visitors, the visitation that will be allowed at schools. It won't be like normal. It'll be very infrequent that there are visitors. Nurse's office will have shields in it, the guidance offices, so anywhere, libraries, anywhere where we can't keep people 6 feet apart, we'll have some plastic barriers. And the cleaning protocols are the most important thing to enable a thorough disinfecting. Every day, throughout the day, we will be having folks go through and disinfecting high-touch areas. And at the end of the school day, we are limiting after-school activities to allow time to do a thorough cleaning. The disinfectant is most effective if the room is very clean. So we'll do a thorough cleaning of every room, all of the common areas, and then disinfecting. We've invested in a lot of the electrostatic disinfecting equipment that puts out a fine mist and can thoroughly disinfect a classroom pretty efficiently as long as it's clean. We have had our experts look at our ventilation systems to make sure we're optimizing our external air that we draw in. Our systems are designed to continually draw in outside air and mix it in with the recirculated air, and we continue our maintenance of filter replacement. And the nurses' offices, we will be putting in the HEPA air purifiers as well. The last thing we're doing is making personal protective equipment available. Clearly, everybody needs to be masked, so we'll have lots of disposable masks available. We've invested over $1 million between the disinfecting equipment and the PPE. We'll also have face shields, hand sanitizer, the Oxivir disinfecting wipes, K95 mask available, the vinyl and nitrile disposable gloves. We'll have disposable gowns and protective suits for staff members who need to work closely with some of our students. Nurses' offices will have infrared thermometers and the oximeters available, as well as the plastic shields we've been putting in. So we've made a significant investment in PPE because we want to ensure the safety of everybody. That's it for operations.
Thank you for that thorough update, Andy. Again, looking at some of the questions that are coming through on the chat, more interest in masking in terms of are there students who are exempt from the rule? The answer is yes. We will have students who are medically exempt. In order to grant an exemption, we have to have documentation from a doctor, and then the district will work with the family to put a protocol in place in order to keep that student safe and to keep the students around that child safe as well. Another question around what we do when a student refuses to wear a mask, and there's a lot of education that's going to have to take place with our students coming back, and we're going to be smart and strategic about our implementation. We need to focus on developing a culture of health and safety, but having said that, in the event that a student refuses to wear a mask after he or she has been asked, there's going to be a conversation, but eventually it may get to a point where we have to treat it as a disciplinary issue, and in that case we would enforce the code of conduct, and to the extent that it was appropriate we would involve administration. I'm seeing some action on the chat centered around things like school-wide closure, quarantine, things of that nature, and I want to address it because the truth of the matter is that on the Thought Exchange, 8 of the 10 top rated thoughts were centered around these very issues, and I can answer them in a very succinct one-sentence answer. So things like what would trigger school-wide or district-wide closure, or what are the standards for school closure, or what happens if we have a COVID case, or you know, if a student was symptomatic and thought to have COVID, what would we do? If someone is exposed to a positive case, who's going to determine if a teacher has to quarantine? Again, what's the threshold to close a building? Who determines when a student is ready to go back to school after they've had COVID or had COVID-like symptoms? So, quite simply put, in all of these cases that I described, those decisions will be made by the Department of Health. Okay, we're a school district, we aren't medical professionals, and so we would take the lead from our Monroe County Department of Health officials. All right, I do want to give Dr. Pat McHugh, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and School Accountability, an opportunity to give a brief update under those aspects of the plan that he is overseeing. To kick off the conversation, I've got a softball for you. Are we hiring lunch monitors this year?
We have several openings, and I would encourage anyone who is looking for employment to please go to our website and visit our jobs page, and you will see several openings there. We do have a variety of openings. We are looking for lunch monitors, as a matter of fact.
Two birds with one stone. We were able to answer this question, and you've got a shameless plug for,
Always shamelessly recruiting. So with that, welcome everyone. I get to speak tonight about our work in the Human Resources Department to help support the reopening of our schools, which we're all very excited and looking forward to. Our two key priorities in Human Resources as we work to get the schools and the district ready to go are, number one, of course, the safety and health of all of our students and our staff, and of course, making sure that we have the adequate and appropriate and highly qualified staff in place to not only make our new remote academy work, but also to ensure that our schools continue to deliver the program so that all students can challenge their potential in this new hybrid model. So as the superintendent described earlier, we are feverishly working at this point to rebuild our staffing plan for the district, especially the teaching staffing piece. It is a monumental task. Typically, that task would take place from January to May in a typical year, and we're having to redo it in a matter of weeks. So we're working very closely with the principals and with the Office of Instruction to ensure that we have the right people in the right place to serve all of the students, regardless of which program they are in. Part of just to give you an idea of the complexity of that, a few years ago, we went through a major district reconfiguration, as I'm sure many of you remember well, where we closed the 9th grade academy, we returned 6th grade to the elementary level, we established junior high schools and intermediate schools, and really changed a lot of our approach to education. That task involved reassigning 1/3 of our teachers to new buildings and new teaching assignments throughout the district. This establishment of the remote academy is requiring us to reassign 1/4 of our teachers to new assignments so that they can serve the students who are being taught from home or are learning or having school at home full time. The difference is, for the reconfiguration, we had 2 years to do that work and prepare for that transition. For this transition, we have less than a month. So it really is a lot to do, but we are confident that we're going to have the pieces in place to make sure that the students are well served. In terms of the safety aspect, Nurland earlier described the daily self-checklist that all parents are being asked to help us with their child to ensure that no one's coming to school with COVID symptoms. Our staff are required to go through the same type of daily checklist every workday prior to coming to work. And if they are experiencing any of those types of symptoms, two things are going to happen. One, they're going to stay home from work and contact their doctors. And two, we are going to get a report in Human Resources that gives us the names of those folks and what symptoms they're experiencing so that we can follow up and make sure that no one is returning to work unless they're symptom-free. So those safeguards are in place to protect all your children and protect our staff and make sure that we all stay safe and healthy as we undergo the learning process. We're working with our staff as well to identify any teachers or paraprofessionals or clerical or bus drivers or anyone who may be already predisposed or at risk for risk factors that would put them potentially in jeopardy if they were exposed to the COVID virus. And finding what alternatives might be available to them so that they're not exposed to large numbers of people or put at risk. So again, all in the interest of maintaining health and safety for everyone in our schools. The complexity of all these tasks was one of the reasons why the district had to establish that hard deadline that the superintendent talked about with the parent survey for the remote academy model. We really needed that information in terms of the enrollment numbers for that model as soon as we possibly could get it, given all the work that needs to take place between that last Monday and the opening of school on September 8th. So that is our focus at this time. We've got great plans in place. Mrs. Wilson has developed with her team a great plan for both the hybrid and the remote models. We're going to be able to even allocate some additional staffing to some of our smaller elementary schools so that if there are some absences due to the pandemic or due to flu season when that comes, we're going to have the staffing in place so that your kids continue to be well served without disruption.
All right, thanks, Pat. Okay, we're going to shift gears and we're going to focus specifically on the questions that we have in our chat because we have a lot of them. I can tell you based on volume that we probably will not get through them in the next 20 minutes, but we will try our best to answer all of them in writing for those that we miss. So this first question is centered around the hybrid model and what happens in the event to students if we had to shut down. In the event that we had to shut down as a district again, then we would go back to a fully remote model. The students who had already enrolled in the Remote Learning Academy, their program would not be disrupted. It would sit separate from the academy that we would develop in place of a hybrid model. Will any efforts be made to keep remote learning academy students connected to their home schools? Dina, do you want to talk about how students well, this might be a combination between you and Pat in terms of how students will be organized within that model and how it's staffed?
Well, as I said earlier, our Remote Learning Academy is basically a school within a school. The way you deliver an online instruction model and a full remote model is very different than how you implement a hybrid model where students are in person and then working virtually from home. Therefore, we have to establish an online community with our schools and with our teachers. So the students will not be working with students per se from their home school. They'll be working with students who are in that grade level or that course throughout the district. They will only be with Rush-Henrietta students. We are not doing this in conjunction with any other school district, but that will be the community that they'll work in. As we start to explore this and put some more details to print, we can think of different opportunities down the road when it comes to maybe when we get into second semester, if we do get into extracurriculars and clubs and so forth. But at this point in time, it is truly a school within a school. And we'll continue to adapt as we go along, but we want to make it very clear that they will be their own class with their online peers.
And with dedicated teachers, the teachers who are assigned to the remote model, to the remote academy, that will be their school. So there may be teachers from throughout the district that your child may be assigned to if they're at the secondary level, for example. So Just to give you a quick example, at elementary, we may have 3 teachers teaching 2nd grade. They're going to teach students from a mixture of home schools. We have teachers that teach geometry and biology in all 3 of our secondary schools. Your child, if they're in a geometry or biology class in the academy, may have a teacher from Roth, they may have a teacher from Berger, or they may have a teacher from the senior high school. For this year, those teachers won't be attached to their old schools. They are going to be a part of the Learning Academy, the Remote Learning Academy, and that's, as Dina said, will be its own community within the district.
And just to give you a little sense with that, we're going to be working with our teachers so that they make sure that they include within their online classrooms the same social emotional learning activities, having conversations, and the same type of activities that would be occurring in person will be happening synchronously virtually. So please know that even though we talk about the learning aspect of this, we are going to still be building in components so that our students can build relationships, have conversations with other students, and really think about how do you truly build a community virtually with the classes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Are students allowed to wear face shield and masks? The answer is yes. You know, students will have to mask unless they are one of the very few who have an exemption, but if parents wanted their children to wear a mask and a face shield, they certainly can. Will remote learners have access to activities like morning announcements or PBIS activities or assemblies? I'll take this one too. No on the morning announcements. It would be near impossible to do that. I expect that remote learning teachers will focus on PBIS related activity as part of that instruction remotely. And as for assemblies, nobody's going to be having assemblies, at least for the first half of the year, because we're very sensitive to bringing people together in mass for health and safety reasons. Okay, let's move on here. See what people are interested in. Andy, why don't you take this one? Where will students eat lunch? Are they staying in the classroom? Did we sort of spoke to this, but maybe just quickly reiterate?
Yeah, we had looked at different options in the classroom spread out between the cafeteria and gym, but where we've landed, most of them will be in the cafeteria with barriers separating each student. So there'll be reduced seating at each table, but they won't be a full 6 feet apart because they'll have plastic shields, and that'll enable some socialization while they eat with their classmates.
Okay, this is a Dina question. Will there be live online instruction for hybrid virtual days?
So for our hybrid virtual days, students will be participating in asynchronous instruction. And let me explain to you the reason for that is because when there's students in the hybrid model working at home in their virtual learning environment, our teachers who are on campus with the in-person students are giving the interaction and are delivering that normal school day to the students. So at this point in time, due to our staffing, we can't allocate extra time for students to be available during the school day to give those teachers release time from the in-person kids to be able to touch base and do anything with our remote kids that day. Therefore, the days that the students are working at home in their virtual learning environment, they're going to be participating in the activities that teachers have posted. And like I said earlier this evening, it's going to be a variety of activities. I think you're going to see it look much different than what it did last spring, because we're really working with our teachers and giving them resources to provide more interactive and engaging activities to do in that asynchronous environment. However, on Wednesdays, we do not have students on campus. That time will be given for our teachers to participate in professional development, because I do want to mention this is a huge learning curve for all of us leading it, as well as our teachers who have the task of implementing it. On Wednesdays, though, we are investigating different options that we can offer if our elementary students are even available during that time to maybe receive some contact time with an intervention teacher, maybe a little bit of time with the classroom teacher, but it would not be an expectation that students log in on a certain time on a Wednesday to meet with their teacher. We are just trying to explore different avenues of thinking how can we make some synchronous instruction available on Wednesdays. That is a detail that we'll be able to answer more clearly over the next couple weeks when we work through the scheduling and really think through what resources we have to give on a Wednesday. At the secondary level in the hybrid model, we developed what we called a skinny schedule for the afternoons. In the mornings, we're going to have our teachers have time to work together and collaborate on the lessons, participate in professional development. We know that our high school, our older students like to do their work a little bit later in the day. Therefore, we'll be offering some time in the afternoon where we have an abbreviated schedule where teachers can log on and receive assistance from teachers as needed. But it will not be a scheduled class that they be attending on those days.
Okay,
And
very good.
can I add something
Yeah.
to that in terms of related services? We know that there are some individuals, some students who receive related services in the form of OT, PT, speech, and maybe ENL services. So it doesn't mean that someone may not touch base with them, because there are other supports that, in addition to being in school, that they can receive. They can also receive some of these supports at home. Do we know that it's 100% working for all? No, but as much as possible on those days when students are at home, we're going to look at the schedule again to determine what are those supports that they are in need of while they are in person, but at the same time, maximizing the time that they are at home to provide some of these supports and services, including counseling.
Okay, very good. That was one of the questions that just came through on the chat is looking at students that have individualized education plans.
Yes.
And have one-to-one staffing assigned to them, and what that looks like in a hybrid model. So, and I don't know if you
Yeah,
have anything else to add.
yeah, that's why I answered the question, because I wanted parents to know that related services and our obligation, regardless of COVID and regardless in terms of the instruction model that we put in place, our obligation is to make sure that students are receiving also a free and appropriate public education. Those students who are eligible for related services, that they get all of the services that they need, including the ENL students who have unit of studies that are specific, that are outlined in Part 154 of the regulations. So other regulations and other obligations that you have come to know did not go away. It's just with COVID, there's additional things that we have to add to the plate. But all of these other requirements, we have to make sure that they occur.
Okay, very good. Here's a quick hitter. Will the district provide children with masks? The answer is yes.
Yes, they will be available. We encourage parents to provide their own, but we certainly will have plenty available.
Very good. What are we going to do about overcrowded hallways to prevent what we saw in Georgia? One of the benefits to the model that we selected, a K-12 hybrid model, is that we have we don't have nearly as many students as we had here on campus. Before those who enrolled in the Remote Learning Academy, before we take those numbers out, you would have had 50% of the kids here. You factor those in, the numbers grow even smaller. It's more like probably 40%. So that's going to help us just in terms of sheer volume, in terms of the number of students that we have in buildings and passing in hallways and things of that nature. But we're also taking additional measures in terms of markings of 6 feet in the hallways. There's going to be a lot of education and working with students around trying to maintain physical distancing. But the reality is that we are a school district, and in a school, for anybody that's spent any given amount of time there, we all have at some point, it's hard to distance all the time. And so in those moments where we can't, then students will wear masks. Here's a unique question. How will, and this will be for Dina, how might supply lists differ between remote learning and hybrid?
Well, for the supply list, you will be getting that information from your schools like you always do, and they are looking for those lists to make sure that we're only asking for the most essential. We want to make sure the students have the supplies that they need for their individual areas, because obviously we'll not be sharing supplies this year. I know it was very common in elementary schools to throw all our crayons in one box and share, but this year they'll be using their own individualized materials that they do bring. They still will need to bring very similar materials into the hybrid program. And likewise, we will be sending information home that what will be necessary in the full remote program. We have at the elementary level identified some essential manipulatives or materials that we use in some of our programs, and we purchased some little at-home kits for things that the kids do in class, especially our younger learners, and we'll be sending them home with students that they can keep at home, so that on the virtual learning days, they would have those materials to continue to work with, or in the event that we would go into an emergency closing that like we did last year, they would already be at home for them to use. Our students in our remote learning academy, they will receive the same materials, textbooks, or if there's any supplemental, as we call them sometimes, workbooks or resource books, they will receive the same materials as well. And we'll be able to give them any resources that they need in our remote learning academy, just like we do with our students in the hybrid model.
Thanks.
We know that you are anxious to buy supplies, and the K-6 elementary principals have told me they've updated those on the website, so check out the website for the supplies list. And if you are one of these parents who say, you know what, how can I help? Can I give something? Can I donate something? My church want to do something? What we are in need of right now is Ziploc bags. So if your church want to do something, or any other organization you want to donate something, Ziploc bags in any size, because like Dina says, we want to make sure that anything that a student use, they can have their own little packet, so that they're not exchanging things with each other.
While you're on a roll, Nurlan, I've got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
This question is related to children that are perceived to be symptomatic but may be exhibiting simply cold symptoms or may have allergies. Will they need to be tested?
Well, what I would say is that in the buildings, we have school nurse teachers who have worked alongside your children. And so if they've been in a building for a number of years, the nurses knows them very well. And again, that's why anytime, because some of these symptoms may look like flu-like symptoms, and we won't know that. That's why as soon as they're exhibiting some of these symptoms, we will immediately isolate them. And part of the process is that the school nurse teacher will put on their proper PPE and will go and assess that student, and immediately will connect with the parents in terms of what are the symptoms that are being experienced. However, we just received also some guidance as well from the local health department. And one of the things that they're asking is that before a student can return, if they have exhibited symptoms, they must have documentation to return to school, must have documentation from a medical professional, show that they have a negative test, and also is free of symptoms. And remember, those COVID-like symptoms are fever, the top three. They are fever, I want to make sure I get them right, fever, cough, shortness of breath. So if you have a student during the school day who's exhibiting a fever of 100 or higher, plus a cough, that's a clear sign that there's a possibility of COVID-19. And that's why we will isolate them and make sure that they follow up with the doctor. Again, all of these guidelines that we have to follow were not developed by us or not made up by us. We are following guidance from CDC, the New York State Department of Health, and also our local health department. And again, when we have a confirmed case, the Monroe County Department of Health will take the lead in terms of isolation, the quarantine, and the release of that individual. If they can confirm that there's a case, the person will be released by them, and they will tell us when that person is able to return. Will they identify that individual? Let's say the individual is a staff member that has a COVID-19 case. They will not release identifiable information about that particular person. What they will, however, say to the community is which district was affected. And we experienced that around March and April in our local community, where you heard that there was a local district that had a person who was ill. For a student in a particular building, they will specifically mention that building, but they won't mention the name of that student.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we're going to get through as many questions as we can. We've got probably 7 or 8 minutes left. Why are we starting in September, not October or November? Contrary to popular opinion, We do not make those decisions here in the school district. Those decisions are decided by the governor in consultation with the Department of Health. Last Friday, the governor gave us the green light to open, so we will be open for business. In September, the first day with students, you should note this because it is a calendar amendment, is going to be September 8th because we wanted to make sure that we had ample time to train faculty and staff. So the first day of students was designated for September 2nd, but that's going to change. The 8th will be the first day for students. When a student refuses to wear a mask or says they can't breathe, how will this be handled? Will they be disciplined? If a student refused to mask for medical reasons, then obviously they wouldn't be disciplined. We are implementing ample masking breaks throughout the course of the day. That's part of our planning, recognizing that it's very difficult for anyone, let alone children, to keep those masks on for 7 hours a day. So that's going to be part of our planning. And we look at that as a student who is unable to keep a mask on because they're having difficulty breathing, being different than some of the scenarios that have been talked about on the chat around, if a student is just simply refusing because they don't feel like it. That will be handled differently than a student who needs a masking break because they're having difficulty breathing. Let's see. How do we get Chromebooks for remote learning? Is it as simple as contacting your child's school?
Yeah. So for the students that are going to be enrolled in the Remote Learning Academy, as soon as we have confirmed all the registrations to that program, we will be sending information out. One, confirming that you are in the Remote Learning Academy, and at that time we'll give you more information regarding supplies and materials such as Chromebooks and other procedures. And we're in the process of already talking about doing a virtual parent open house like this before school starts. So our administrators and our teachers can have a conversation with you and answer a lot of the questions specific to the Remote Learning Academy once your child is enrolled. All our students will get Chromebooks, K-12, in the hybrid model and the remote learning, including our kindergartners. We want to remind you to bring them back to school. You've had them all summer, so that we can do any kind of repairs, replacements that are necessary. There are certain grade levels that will receive new Chromebooks. We do a 3-year replacement cycle. We have some Chromebooks that are on back order, but I think we have a plan that we're going to have enough here to open up the year so that our kindergartners can receive theirs. We'll probably get the kindergarten Chromebooks out a week within the school year. It will take us some time to get them up and going on those before we send them home. So all our students, once again, in Rush-Henrietta will have a Chromebook. I do want to mention, folks, I know you're going to be winding up here a little bit. I do want to remind people that on the district webpage, under our reopening plans, we do have a document that really does a nice job outlining what the Remote Learning Academy is all about. And we also have a document that outlines our hybrid program as well. And I think they would be 2 resources if you have not looked at already to spend some time reviewing, because you will clearly be able to identify what is similar between the programs, what is different, and most importantly, which one is going to meet the needs of your students and the choices that you've made.
Very good. Thanks, Tina. All right, let's look for a couple quick hitters here. See if we can answer a few more questions. Andy, this one's for you, hot off the press. If we have arranged to drive our kids, do you still want us to let you know? Meaning the transportation department?
Yes, please. That certainly will help with our bus routing. Just send a email to the transportation director.
Okay, very good. For kids that are on the hybrid model that go Monday, Thursday, will their first day be on the 8th? No, it would be on the 10th, right?
Yes.
My math correct?
Yeah.
That's kindergarten math, but superintendents can't count. Let's see. If we choose the Remote Learning Academy, this is again a Dina question, can the school allow students to choose all asynchronous programs? And I would say, unfortunately, the answer is no.
No, we need to have that. Yeah.
What will happen if there is a positive COVID case or a cluster? Again, we're not going to make determinations about who needs to quarantine or who, when we're going to close. We would contact the Department of Health, and they immediately would take the lead on making those decisions related to quarantine and closure and those kinds of things. Let's see here. Will the schools have any sort of thermal devices to scan temperatures in mass?
Yes.
Yeah, each school does have a thermal camera, but that's going to be more for the visitors, and it's the self-screening at home, and that is the first line.
Yes.
And then students who aren't able to do it at home, nurses will arrange to have them done.
Here's a good one. How will blended families be able to fill out the health survey if a child lives in different households? Nirlan?
Sorry,
I'll
say that
repeat it
again. I had another one.
How will blended families be able to fill out the health survey if a child lives in different households?
There is I believe there is a primary person on email. So I believe both parties will receive that email, so one of them needs to complete that survey. As long as the survey is completed every night for that particular student. If the student is staying one night at another parent's house versus another night at another parent, what we would say is that they will receive it. They just make sure that they complete that survey.
Okay.
And people want to know where to drop off Ziploc bag. Well, I will gladly receive them here at the administration building. So you can drop them off anytime. There will be a receptionist at the front. And again, we will follow those same protocols in terms of asking you these questions prior to allowing you in.
Okay. Is the district going to test students before they are able to attend school this year? Again, as a district, we will have a COVID testing and a contact tracing plan in place, but that is orchestrated by the Department of Health, and we're not going to be in the business of testing students for COVID every day. If a student had potential exposure or was symptomatic, then the Department of Health would make a determination about whether or not they would be tested. The testing we were speaking about, both Pat and Nirlan are talking about the daily attestation, which is a monitoring of symptoms daily. It's going to be an app through Frontline that families have to submit on a daily basis. So that's the only testing that we're planning on doing. And in the event that that wasn't submitted, then at the school level, we would have to do a temperature check. All right, let's do one more, and then we've got to close it out here. Let's see, let's look for a really good, thought-provoking question to end on. How do we handle drop-off and pick-up for school? I think that's an Andy question. And how will it be handled for Cub Care?
Drop off for Cub Care, same way that we've done it before with all of the precautionary measures. And Cub Care, let me just say this, Cub Care will be up and running. If you haven't registered already, registration is open. In the same way you used to do it before, we'll just have extra staff. We'll take all of the extra precautionary measures that we are taking throughout the district. And as a matter of fact, Cub Care is even a little bit more stringent because of all of the other rules that we have to follow to provide before and after care. So, but the drop-off will be the same. So once you signed up, you will get more information from our Cub Care office as well.
Anything to add, Andy, related to general school drop-off?
Very similar, other than we ask parents not to bring your kids to the main office or try to bring them into the school. Each school, elementary school, well, actually every school will have a parking lot arrangement for parent drop-off, and there'll be staff outside the building. So just let your child outside of the car when it's safe to do so, and the staff member will direct them into the building.
Okay, thank you. All right, our time is unfortunately up, and we had a great participation throughout the session. So we're going to answer questions. We'll probably do some consolidation because a lot of these are duplicates, but we'll answer these questions in writing and make them available to folks. I also want to remind everyone that we are going to have another forum We have 2 more forums scheduled, one for tomorrow, another for Friday. I believe our start time is 2 p.m. tomorrow and 10:30 on Friday. So we invite you to tune in with us again. And as I said before, we'll try to turn these questions around as quickly as we can. We're going to do some consolidation. Again, thank you all. Thank you to our team. And thank you to all of you who tuned in with us and participated. Be well.
Good night.